So, after listening to many creepy stories on YouTube, I've decided to make a Reddit account to submit my own that I still haven't managed to get over. This is quite the long one, so just bear with me. I've encountered a person that I'll call Window Man that has really messed me up. This happened in summer 2018, so about 8 months ago. Some background story to help better understand the situation I was in and the layout of the apartment. My mom and I moved into this one-room apartment with one of my mom's colleagues, all females, for a short period of time, about 3 months, to be able to save up some money for another apartment that we currently live in. So, the apartment had a small bathroom and shower, a kitchen merged with the living room, a small room separated by a sliding door, and a windowed balcony. We lived on the first floor, and even I, being the short 5'4" girl, managed to climb up into the window when I forgot my keys at home. Anyways, since the colleague needed some privacy, she chose to live in the small room. My mom would sleep on the couch in the living room and I'd sleep on the balcony on a mattress. Now, when I would lay on my mattress, from my point of view I'd see the living room and the couch on my right, and the windows on my left, though there were some behind me that I wasn't really able to see. Alright, now to the actual story. We moved in. Everything was going great the first month or so. I felt quite safe even though I was very suspicious from the very start of the windows since we lived on the first floor. And I should mention that I've never experienced anything paranormal, nor have I had sleep paralysis before. So, one night I wake up, or at least I think so. I can't move. I can only blink my eyes and move my head. I look over to the windows, and I see what looks like a third of a man's head and a hand peeking through the window. I tried to scream and get up, but I couldn't move or do anything. I was so terrified. I saw the man slowly closing the window as if he was trying to not make any sound, and lowering his head as if he were leaving. I was freaking out, but still couldn't move. I saw my mom on my right, sleeping on the couch, and on my left my hand was hanging off the mattress, and my cat was headbutting it, as if he's trying to wake me up. I try to scream again a few times, but it doesn't work. I'm hysterical at this point, and I feel tears welling up in my eyes. Suddenly, I wake up. I shoot up from my bed, my cat still next to the mattress, and my mom still on the couch, sleeping in the same position I've seen her in. I look at the window panicking, and it's locked from the inside, just like I left it before going to sleep. I unlocked it and opened it, making sure that there's nobody outside. I close and lock the window, and lay back down, sobbing. I just cried myself to sleep that night. A few days later, I've decided to tell my mom about the dream. I didn't want to at first because I thought that she wouldn't pay much attention to it. But since it had me so on edge, I told her, and just as I expected, she told me that I've been listening to too many horror stories and didn't take me too seriously. After maybe a week, I forgot about the dream and moved on. And then, one evening, everything was going fine. I was preparing myself for the next day since I had to do a big presentation in front of the whole class, and I wanted to look my best. It was about midnight. I took a shower, brushed my teeth, and went to sleep as usual. My mom was still up on her phone but about to go to sleep. I doze off peacefully, but suddenly I wake up for no reason and have the massive urge to look behind me at the windows. To my horror, I saw a tall man in my window, about halfway in, with one leg almost on the floor. I panicked and thought that I was dreaming again, but quickly realized that I can move. So no, I wasn't dreaming. Still being in a state of fear and confusion, I whispered, "What the hell?" And to my complete horror, the man looked up, all dark but eyes shining in the moonlight, put on the creepiest ear-to-ear grin, put a finger to his lips, and shushed me in the most menacing way ever. I had no idea what to do, so I said louder, "What the hell?" And then I jumped up and screamed, "What the hell?" and started screaming like a banshee. The guy got startled and almost fell back, so I took the opportunity and closed and locked the window just as he was about to try to get back in. My screaming woke my mom up, and she ran up asking what happened. I started nervously explaining all that happened, and then we saw the dude climb up to our window again, but the one right next to me, trying to open it. As I saw that, I screamed even louder, and as he was opening it, I pushed him and he fell down, calling me every name under the sun. He then tried to make up some awful excuse, but in my panicked state, I started yelling at him at the top of my lungs to get the hell out. I kept on yelling for about 5 minutes like a total crazy person until the guy finally said something along the lines of fine, then almost as if I was obliged to let him in, and started walking away. I slammed all the windows shut and locked them, sat down on my mattress, and proceeded to sob loudly as my mom was next to me, trying to calm me down. We thought that was it, but a few minutes later I saw him again, climbing up our balcony. And I started screaming again, opened one of the windows and yelled so loud that I almost lost my voice. I closed and locked the window, and my mom and I went to the guard to tell him what happened. I described the man to him as best as I could, but since it was dark I couldn't say much about his appearance. He told us to just go home and stay calm, that he'll handle the situation. When we were going back, we saw about 8 neighbors of ours standing outside wondering what happened. They all gave us sympathetic looks as we went back home. My mom gave me some medicine to help calm me down, and I was crying and shaking vigorously for about an hour until I finally was so exhausted that I just went to sleep with her, since I didn't want to sleep on the balcony anymore. The next day I showed up to school looking like trash, and when I told someone what happened, they either didn't believe me or would brush it off saying it's fine, you're alright now. After a few days my mom confronted me about it and said she was sorry that she didn't take my dreams seriously, though I wasn't mad at all, just shocked. She said that she was just about to fall asleep but woke up to me screaming. She told me that my screams were the most blood-curdling ones she's ever heard in her life. But the scariest part is that I woke up for no reason. I just had the massive urge to look back. There was absolutely no noise when the man opened the window and was climbing in. I even asked my mother if she heard anything, and she said that no, it was absolutely silent. Who knows what the man would have done if I wouldn't have woken up, though I'm glad I didn't have to find out. The fact that also really shook me is that I had a dream of something similar happening about 3 weeks before it actually happened in real life. Though sadly I don't know what happened to that man, if he was arrested or not. We never saw him again, but either way I'm just glad that we moved out of that apartment soon later. And to you, window man, that has traumatized me that day, let's not meet again. This happened to me my freshman year of college. Tinder was new, and everyone at my university was on the app. I joined to see what all of the fuss was about. Looking through profiles, I found a few guys that were really interesting, and this one guy in particular caught my eye. We will call him Walter. I swipe right on Walter, and we matched. I was excited and kinda giddy because he was super attractive. He messages me and I got butterflies in my stomach. We message on the app for maybe an hour. Typical conversation is happening. I asked what he did for a living. He asked what my major was. Harmless conversation. After a while he asked for my number so we could text instead of message on this app. I gave it to him. He seemed nice enough. We messaged back and forth for a few days. Lots of flirty conversation, and plans to hang out finally occurred. By the 4th day of conversation he started calling me babe, which gave me mixed feelings. It was cute, but also a little weird. We didn't really know each other and had never met. I ignored it and continued on with the conversation. He started saying he wanted to be exclusive, and he really wanted to see me in person. He was begging me at this point to come to his apartment to cuddle and watch movies with him and his dog. I told him that our first meet needed to be in public. I would not be going to some stranger's apartment. He said I was overreacting and kept begging. I ignored him for the rest of the night. The next day he apologized and said he understood we needed to meet in public, so we made plans that weekend. The weekend came faster than I expected, and it was the day we were supposed to meet. Something just fell off, and I decided to back out. I texted him apologizing, saying my mom wasn't feeling well and needed me to come home to help her with some house chores. This made him annoyed, and he said your mom is a big girl. If she needs you, she can call you. Just come over and you can leave whenever to go help her. I really want to see and kiss you. I told him now that I would be staying with my mom that weekend, and that was that. I only lived about 30 minutes from home, so I actually did go home to see my mom that day. After what he said about my mom, I started ignoring him, and the texts started rolling in, text after text. "Babe, I'm sorry. Please come over. Babe, I miss you. Are you going to come over?" I planned on replying the next day that I was just busy with my mom. Then he started calling me. I had a total of 45 missed phone calls within a 2-hour period. He left voicemails saying he was sorry, and he just missed me and wanted me to call him back. Similar voicemails continued almost the entire time I was home. My roommate texted me shortly after I finished dinner with my mom and asked if we could go out that night. I agreed and went back to my university dorm. Suddenly the calls from Walter started to increase again. More texts, voicemails, and he started messaging me again on Tinder asking why I wasn't replying to him. I wasn't planning on replying until I got a message on Instagram that said, "Why didn't you tell me you were coming back to town tonight?" Getting this message really freaked me out. I replied to them and said, "Sorry, I've been busy with my mom." "How did you know I was back in town?" He said, "Well, I checked your Tinder. Of course, Tinder doesn't tell exact locations, but has a within 1 mile message." This really freaked me out, and I messaged him back and said that he was being really creepy. He seriously had to be constantly refreshing my profile to see the distance change. The messages, calls, and voicemails continued. All were him now apologizing for making me feel weird about him knowing where I was. He was just worried about me. We had been texting for less than a full week. I told my roommate about it, and so we decided to stay in that night. The last straw for me was getting a message saying, "Look, I'm really sorry. I'm outside your dorm with flowers and chocolates. Please forgive me." Oh hell no. I called campus security and told them about this guy, and they never found anyone waiting outside any of the doors. I'm assuming he was in his car waiting for me to reply. I blocked him on all socials, phone number, deleted Tinder, and have never been back on since. I have seen him once out and about in the town, but he never recognized me, thankfully. Walter, if you ever read this, I'm glad we never met. Thanks for making me second guess every single guy I find attractive. So, I've kind of been wanting to post this for a while, but a combination of technical difficulties and residual fear have been preventing me from doing so thus far. Now, though, it's the middle of the night and I've got nothing better to do, so I'm going to get this off my chest. I grew up with parents who were reasonable, loving people, but who were also more than a little paranoid when it came to the internet. Anything that allowed anonymous communication in any form was banned, point blank, from the household. Even Club Penguin wasn't allowed because you could chat in it. Naturally, when I got my first laptop at 12, it was a piece of crap, gotten only because all of my homework that year was online. The first thing I did was start trying to talk to people online. I wasn't going in chat rooms or anything because my parents' warnings still resonated with me, but I wasn't avoiding contact either. I ended up making a DeviantArt account. I know, cringe, where I didn't do much posting as I lack artistic talent. In spite of this, however, I was contacted via private message by a guy who I'll call Joker because his profile picture was of the Joker. That should have been a warning sign in and of itself. Honestly, Joker just started talking to me out of the blue. I think I commented on one of his pieces or something, and he reached out to me to thank me for my kind words. We started talking. It turned out we had a lot of common interests. We played some of the same games, liked some of the same cartoons, etc. He seemed like a really, really nice guy. I think it was maybe a week or two in that the first uncomfortable thing happened. Even if I didn't exactly think much of it at the time, the two of us shared a somewhat misanthropic view of the world, so there were a lot of dark jokes passed back and forth between us. Sometime about a week after we first started messaging, he casually mentions thinking that the world would be better off without him. I sent him a sad face and assured him that it wouldn't, as I quite liked talking to him. He didn't say anything more about it then, so I assumed that was it. It wasn't. Joker talked about suicide a lot. His talking about it quickly morphed from passing commentary to long, graphic rants about how much he hated himself and wanted to die and what method would be best for him to do so. I spent hours talking him down over chat, terrified that one day I wouldn't be able to do enough, and he'd actually do it. As messages started to get creepy in a different way, He started telling me how grateful he was to have me, how no one had ever cared about him as much as I did, how important I was to him, how he couldn't live without me, how he'd just die if ever he were to lose me. He was obsessed. Well, one day, a couple months in, my laptop breaks. It wasn't too bad, but it still took a couple of days before everything was back in working order. I logged back into DeviantArt to find dozens of messages, all from Joker. They started off normal enough, but quickly became frantic after I didn't respond. The last message he had sent was along the lines of "I can't take this anymore," followed by a link to a picture image. The image was of a pair of slit wrists. The cuts were deep and fairly fresh looking, too, with red inflamed edges and the beginnings of an ugly scabbing just beginning to settle over the top. I was horrified. I quickly messaged him back, terrified I'd just lost a friend, and he responded. "I thought I'd lost you," he said. "I thought you'd left me. I couldn't handle the pain without you. Don't ever do that to me again." I said I wouldn't, and he seemed relieved. He only got worse from then on. It reached a point where practically our every conversation consisted of him either professing his obsession with me, threatening suicide, or both. The stress was keeping me up at night. I was terrified that one day soon I'd open up the chat and see nothing. I was utterly convinced it was my job to keep this guy alive, and that I was failing miserably at it. Joker kept escalating until one day, nearly a year in, he finally said something that frightened me so badly I had to leave. Joker started talking about how I was the last good person left on this miserable planet, and stuff like that. He waxed poetic about how much he wanted to kill himself, and said that he'd finally found a way to truly be happy. He said the only way he'd ever be able to find happiness was in killing himself and taking me with him. That way we would always be together, free from the cruel weight of the world. He started going into very detailed, very graphic descriptions of how he'd kill me. A lot of them involved carving out my heart, then clutching it to his chest, and laying beside me as he took his own life too. I was terrified, enough so that I did what I should have done a long time ago, and deleted that account. For years following that incident, I never spoke to anyone online. Even to this day, actually, there's still a lingering sense of dread when it comes to online interaction. So, to the boy who I thought was my first internet friend, I don't know what your deal was, whether you were mentally ill or purposefully malicious, or some combination of the two, but whatever the case may have been, let's not meet. Last year I was hiking in Shenandoah, Virginia. It was a planned 2-day hiking trip, myself and 2 friends. Late into the first day, one of my friends grew ill and decided to turn back. The second friend joined him, just in case it got worse. They told me to go on, and seeing as I had been looking forward to the trip, I did. As evening approached, I came upon a clearing in the forest. On a table, surrounded by tools and several cans of spray paint, was an elaborate dollhouse. It was large, perhaps 3 feet tall. Its walls and windows were open, as if it had just been built, and was drying. That lingering smell of spray paint still hung in the air around it. On the back of the house, a photo had been affixed. It was a family picture, old, perhaps taken in the 80s. Everyone in the picture looked very awkward, like they didn't want to be taking the picture, or were forced to. Not scared, just very awkward. I left it and continued on so that I might reach my planned campsite by nightfall. The wind had picked up considerably. In the distance, I heard a branch give and fall, crashing to the forest floor, startling me. I found my campsite, but was a bit unnerved by the dollhouse in the middle of nowhere. I realized I didn't want to camp out in the open where whoever was working on it might stumble upon me. I had one of those little one-person tents that stand just tall enough for a person to lay down in. I set it up behind a thick stand of brush, one side blocked off by a tall stand of rocks. I was glad for this because not only was I now hidden, but the rocks effectively blocked the heavy winds, which had now turned cold as the frigid air tumbled down from the mountains at night. The sound of the wind-churned forest was relaxing, and I think I fell asleep right away. Have you ever been awoken by a loud sound, and you're unsure what it was exactly, but some remnant of it echoes in your mind for a moment after waking? That's what happened to me sometime later in the pitch dark. I had the sensation that someone was near. I listened intently, trying to hear over the wind. I heard a man's voice somewhere in the distance, harsh, rapid, then becoming softer. He was too far away for me to discern what he was saying, but close enough that I could hear inflection and cadence. It sounded like a crazy person scolding himself. Then, his voice becoming softer, answering. As I listened, his voice grew louder and louder until I could hear his clumsy footfalls crashing towards me. He walked by where I was camped, just several feet away from the brush that concealed me. By now my eyes had adapted somewhat to the pale moonlight, but I still couldn't make out anything more than a large, massive shape. He was probably about 6'6", heavily built. He was carrying something long beneath his arm, a rolled-up tent I guessed. He was angrily talking about someone's face and how it haunted him. His voice then became childlike, and his conversation with himself turned to the topic of cheese and crackers. The dude was clearly off his rocker, that or high on something real good. After a moment he continued on, his voice receding until I could no longer hear him. I slept little that night afterward. At first light I booked it back the way I came, back to town. I noted that the dollhouse was not in the clearing when I passed back by. Whoever that stranger in the night was, I am glad we did not meet.